Discover the advantage of unlimited access to all the stories and resources from IBJ and inside Indiana business. From insights to inspiration, business leaders rely on the IBJ for all things Indiana business. Start your $1 a week trial now at ibj.com/trial offer.
Do you want to mix moments of inspiration with time to network? IBJ Media Events has you covered. From industry deep dives to awards celebrations honoring Indiana's top leaders, see what's coming up and reserve your seat now at ibj.com/register.
This is the IBJ Podcast for the week of September the 4th, 2025, brought to you by Taft. I'm your host, Mason King. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Home ownership is viewed in many circles as a standard rite of passage for young adults. It indicates a certain financial wherewithal and the understanding that buying a home is an early key to building wealth. It's supposed to be one of your most important investments. It's the prime ingredient in what we consider the American dream. And let's just speak freely here. If you are in your 30s or 40s and you don't own a home, folks are going to remind you ad nauseum that you're burning money on rent without building any equity. But is home ownership always a smart move? Are the millennials and members of Gen Z who are struggling to afford homes right now due to debts and the rising cost of living, are they in dangerous economic territory? In this week's edition of the IBJ Podcast, personal finance expert and frequent guest on the IBJ Podcast, Peter Dunn, a.k.a. Pete the Planner, breaks down the orthodoxy of home ownership and discusses when it makes the most sense. He says that while owning a home does solve a couple of major financial problems, it can create many more. It's not at all necessary to get started right away, and there's a navigable path for renters in their 40s to end up in a very comfortable situation by retirement. Here's our conversation. As always, it's my pleasure to welcome back to the podcast, Peter Dunn, a.k.a. Pete the Planner. Pete, the kids are back in school, hastening the day they'll enter college. Does that give you any extra anxiety?
It's a little quieter in our house, so that's good. High school football games are back on the schedule. I'm good. Yeah, it's a lot of moving pieces for a lot of families in central Indiana.
Okay. We had previously spoken about your advice for parents regarding how much of the financial burden they should assume for the cost of their kids going to college. Can we revisit that just for a second?
Sure. I mean, this is a tough guy take. I've really backed down on a lot of my tough guy takes over the last couple of decades of doing this, but this one persists. It is, do not sacrifice your retirement to send your kid to college. And here's what people usually do. They don't create that binary. They say, yeah, I'm going to take money out of my retirement, but I'm actually not going to look at how it impacts my retirement. I'm just going to move this money and I'll figure it out later. Well, when you take that much money that late in the game out of your retirement nest egg, Mason, you're toast. So do not throw yourself in the grenade of retirement for college. Just don't do it. It never works.
Okay. Does that mean that the kids have to cover it all? That they have to get a loan or whatever arrangements they make with the school, with lenders?
There are a couple things, and I'm glad you asked that follow-up question because I'm also saying, like, don't take out Parent Plus loans. Like, just don't do it. It starts with the decision of where you're attending. If you don't have assets to handle the 4 years there as an adult that are non-retirement, that aren't specifically set aside for college, and the amount your student can borrow in federal student loans don't cover the cost of that college, don't go there. Just don't go. And that's a hot take, by the way. I'm really excited to read my email after this episode because someone's going to get mad at me.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty common thing. However, I'll just say, Mason, like, you got to start asking those questions. Hey, if you can't afford it, maybe don't go. Go somewhere you can afford. It seems like proper consumerism, but that also is, again, a strangely hot take. It's so weird that that's a hot take, but it is a hot take.
So what do your kids understand about how this affects them as they get closer? They're pretty close, right?
Yeah, they're 16 and 13. So One, they know I've been saving money for them. They know that they can help out the best they can with academic performance. And they know that we're not going blank check, right? So those are the three things they know. But again, it's not even just about college. I think, your kids get to watch you make decisions about vacation and where you go out to eat. They get to see how resourceful you are with limited resources, and that sets its tone as much as a very distinct conversation about education.
Yeah, I've kind of fallen into the habit of complaining about how much it costs to go out to eat whenever I'm with my family. So I'm hoping that's sinking in.
Dude, that's an advanced move. Do you do the old double take at the menu price, or when it comes? You look at it and you go back to it real quick.
I'm like my grandfather. I check the math on the receipt.
Oh, well, look at you. Thank goodness for an iPhone, because I don't know if your math's ready at that hour of the evening.
Oh, iPhones can do that?
Yeah, of course. iPhones can do anything.
Okay. I didn't want to talk about college today. Okay. It's not the investment I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about the wisdom of buying a home. And this topic came to me a couple of weeks ago when our guests on the podcast talked about living in a makeshift RV. That was Carmen Johnson, who had just been named to IBJ's annual list of local leaders in their 20s. She initially took the typical financial route after college, like getting that secure corporate job, buying the house. Then she decided, wait, this doesn't really mesh with my values. She kept her job, but she made arrangements to work a great deal of the year on the road, living in a converted school bus. And she sold the house after a few years of ownership. So the question everyone in the newsroom had for her was, like, you've already gone to the trouble of buying a house. Aren't you worried that you now are not building any equity in real estate, which we all sort of think of as like an inherent good, an inherent financial good? And I don't mean to this would be a criticism of Carmen, because I did the exact same thing in my 30s when I bought a house in 2002 and then sold it during the great whatever that was, the Great Recession, because I thought I needed a change in my life. Yeah. But it all leads me to this bigger question. Is it always smart to buy a home? Is it always a smart investment?
I listened to that podcast, and I was really impressed with her. No surprise she got that award and designation. Also say she made a great decision. She's not asking for me to evaluate her financial decision, nor should she. But from the cheap seats, I thought she made a really good decision. I liked it. Here's the thing about housing. It causes more problems than it solves, generally speaking. Owning a home causes more problems than it solves. It only solves two problems. And oftentimes people seek home ownership for problems that can't be solved. Okay, so here are the two it actually solves. When you own your home outright, you eliminate a housing expense in retirement. Okay, so if I don't know why we're going through the lens of Carmen, but we are here. She had other priorities that she wanted to pursue, so it actually wasn't beneficial for her to try to solve that problem at this stage of her career. Someone trying to solve that problem in their 20s, there's other problems to go out and solve. There are other itches to scratch or scratches to itch. I don't know how the idiom works, but I'll tell you this, that she made a good decision because she wasn't trying to solve that problem. The other problem it solves is another one she wasn't trying to solve, and that is to build theoretical generational wealth, right? When you die, that's a fun topic. When you die and your house goes to someone else, it's an interesting wealth transfer tool. It's not perfect. There's a lot better ways to do it, but it's interesting. Because otherwise, unless you're taking out a reverse mortgage near the end of your life, all of that home equity isn't wealth necessarily for you because it's in your house. You can't really do anything with it. So I think housing solves only those two issues, home ownership and nothing else financially. And Mason, I know you're going to say, but you got a family. It's the structure of your home. It's where you lay your head at night. It's where you make memories. That's none of my business.
So this is a relevant question for us, I think, because here in central Indiana, we have seen sales of existing homes in the 17-county central Indiana area decline this year by about 3%.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the median sales price for a home in that same area rose 6.6% in July from the previous July. And, it's relevant, at least in the news media, because we make a lot of noise about people in their 20s and 30s simply not having the wherewithal to buy a home, and we act like they're missing out on something.
Yeah.
And you're shaking your head now.
Well, I guess I should have started here. I'm not a realtor, but I do know how to pronounce realtor. So take whatever I'm saying with that proper grain of salt. I think home ownership is so wildly different than it's been in the last several years that a 20-year-old, someone in their 20s, I should say, should feel no pressure to participate in home ownership right now. It's just too chaotic. And I'll say one of the reasons why home sales has decreased is because you've seen interest rates remain relatively high as to what they've been in the last few years. And on top of that, you've seen CPI, or consumer inflation, you've seen it increase. And so now you've got this scenario where just the general cost of living non-housing is more expensive, and it's more expensive to borrow money. Now, why the price of homes keep going up is interesting in spite of that, because economics would tell you that supply and demand would have the price of homes going down.
Right. So why are they going up?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You could argue, and I think there's some validity to this, that investment groups coming up and buying up the housing market for rentals and things like that make prices go up. You could argue that because they have such deep pockets that they're not actually competing against the local consumer.
Mm-hmm.
You could argue that. I don't know. I don't know. How about this? I don't know.
Thank you. Just tangentially, the house across the street from us went up for sale 2 weeks ago. It had a pending sign in front of it within a week, and they were asking a price that is probably about $150,000 higher than our home's valuation. And it went that fast, and it just kind of made me do a double take. There are a lot of good things about our neighborhood, but it seems like houses on our street are going for a lot higher than our house is currently valued.
I've had a similar thought recently. A house did the same thing in my neighborhood, and I thought, okay, man, I would love to capture that equity by selling right now. But what I'm not, it's so predictable what I'm about to say that it's almost laughable. Is what I do not want to sell is my 2.5% mortgage, right? I refuse to part with my 2.5% mortgage, because if I had to go rehouse and I wasn't just going to pay cash with all the equity, I'd be back at a 6.5%, and I would not be able to sleep.
Yes, and I think that is, now that I recall, all the real estate reporting we did kind of post-pandemic, is that was one of the big reasons why people were adding to their homes and not selling their homes, is because interest rates were really high and they had locked in low rates prior to the pandemic.
At the risk of being a bald man making things up on the internet, it also could say that's why people are asking for a premium price on their home, because they're going to be getting into higher interest rates for whatever their next home situation is. I do think part of this conversation, it's really important to think about the history of mortgages. I think that's a really, really, really important topic here. How they've changed not only in the last 30 years, but how they've changed in the last 90 years, because it really speaks to Americans trying to solve a shelter problem in a completely different way than they used to.
Mm-hmm. Can you say more about that?
Of course, I was hoping you'd ask. All right, so in the 1930s, all right, mortgages were 3 to 5 years long. 3 to 5 years.
No way, I didn't know that.
Totally. So 3 to 5 years. It wasn't until after World War II when the length of mortgages really started to grow. And that opened up the market of who could afford homes. It actually was brilliant. And then what the mortgage industry did and the banking industry did is they kept trying to find ways appropriately. This is not inappropriate or nefarious. It is to stoke that market, because if you're lending money on a higher loan amount because the value of the home is higher, then you're getting higher origination fees. It feels like everyone's rowing in the same direction, right? Like banks want the price of homes to increase because when they loan money on those homes for the bigger amount of money, they make more money. So they started trying to grow the pool of potential borrowers. And they did it several different ways, even up into the crisis of 2008. They went to a 20-year mortgage. Then they went to a 30-year mortgage. Then they went to interest-only mortgages. Then they went to adjustable rate mortgages. And we even saw in the 2000s, during the big boom of 2006, 2007, 40-year mortgages. And Mason, I would suggest that we're going to go back to a period of time of more creative mortgage structure here in the late 2020s, because not only of how the concern of how quickly interest rates are going to come down, but the general price of housing makes it untenable for most young families.
Right. So that leads me into my next question. So let's say that I'm buying a home curious. What's that? BYAHC. Buying a home curious. What are the conditions for a smart home purchase?
So there's like guidelines out there that your mortgage payment should be less than 28% of your gross income. Like that's a thing. Okay. So that is a pretty standard thing.
I'm super dumb. Okay. I don't know what gross income is.
Okay. So it's like disgusting income. No, it is. It's pre-tax income, right? So like, let's say you make $60,000 a year.
Oh, it's what I consider my salary.
Yeah, but it's before taxes and before all those sorts of things. That's why
it's not my take home.
No, it's not your take home. I like take home pay as a measure. I think 28% of gross is a mistake. I think if you do that, you're going to regret it. I like 25% of net, and every person listening to this podcast right now just guffawed or because it's an ideal number. And it forces you to go, okay, well, I can't do that, but maybe 30. And I'm okay with 30. What I just can't have you do is get up to 40 or above, because then you're toast. You're not retiring. You're not funding your kids' college. You're going into debt. And that's where things get hard.
Okay. So let's say that my wife and I together, our take home, I mean, the amount of money that actually goes into our bank account combined in a month is $4,000. Let's say your suggestion is that my mortgage payment should not be above, what did you say, about $1,000?
Yeah, $1,000. That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, okay. So a couple things to note here. If people aren't listening too closely, first of all, what's wrong with you? You should be listening closer. Number two, obviously you used a lower number as the hypothetical amount there, right?
Oh, I did?
Yeah, you did. And so then naturally that $1,000 number is low. And so I don't want people to go, $1,000, it's impossible to find housing for $1,000. Maybe it is. That's not the point we're making. The point we're making is if you don't want your home to become a burden to the rest of your financial life, trying to stick somewhere between 25 to 30% when doing a 30-year mortgage. This is an important factor here.
Right.
If you're doing a 15-year mortgage, I'm okay with you going higher than 30%. Like, I think I'm very okay with that, because then, as long as you don't move later into your dream home or whatever, you are solving the problem of the cost of housing in retirement by owning the home outright prior to retirement.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. With more than 800 attorneys in 8 primary Midwest markets and the District of Columbia, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
All right, we're back with this week's edition of the IBJ Podcast and my conversation with Pete the Planner about the orthodoxy of buying a home as a necessary investment. Here's the complicating factor.
Okay.
Houses are expensive besides the mortgage. Like we just put a new roof on our house. It's $15,000, which is more than actually what we pay annually for our mortgage. You got to buy rakes, a lot of raking. You have to buy insurance. You have to pay taxes. So is there a separate formula for figuring out like how much in home expenses you should be spending in a year or in a month?
Always considered you to be a rakish young man, but I did not know that you spent so much on rakes.
That's when I was in my 20s.
Here's what's interesting about, and we're gonna go younger folks here. So I'm not talking about you and me. Okay, we're gonna go late 20s, early 30s, buying your first place, really stretching yourself to buy your first place is what I did, and probably what you did, because that's what everybody kind of does. Here's the mistake people make there. Is that they wipe out their emergency fund to do it for the down payment. And then they get into this situation of home ownership, which is just a giant liability waiting to happen when one of the mechanicals breaks down, or you got to mulch, or there's a sale on rakes at Ace Hardware, and it's just before you know it, the act of not throwing money away via rent becomes a debt exercise. And Again, I haven't been that age for a while, but that was super common, and I still see it today with people stretching themselves on home ownership. And you would think the older folks like us would learn that too when they get into their dream home or empty nester home, but they haven't seemed to learn that lesson either.
Dude, can I just say, don't overbuy on mulch. We have the same mulch pile in our driveway that we had 3 years ago.
Well, it seems like you need more shovels and less rakes.
I think we need more kids to do yard work.
That's definitely the solve, I think. So one of the big barriers of entry of home ownership is often the down payment. And a lot of financial experts will say, don't buy a home unless you can put 20% down. Well, Mason, we're just talking about how expensive homes are. And if you're buying a $400,000 home and you need a 20% down payment, do a lot of late 20-somethings or early 30-somethings have $80,000 just laying around? And the answer is no, they don't. So they have to get pretty creative by not putting 20% down. Sometimes people will put 10% down and then do a second loan to borrow the other 10% to put down, or they'll get this type of mortgage in which you don't need 20% down. Maybe it's like 3% down. And then on the other side of that too, you get people transferring wealth from their parents to them via down payment assistance. And that's a really slippery slope as far as I'm concerned, not because of anything, again, nefarious, but because if you are only able to own a home because someone helped you overcome one of the barriers of home ownership, which is a down payment, you might be tricking yourself into thinking you can actually afford that home. I think, it's weird that saving for a down payment is great practice in funding an emergency fund, which you're going to need to own a home. So I think, again, for that first-time homeowner, if you borrow or get a gift from your parents for a down payment, it can mess you up. It's not as simple as just, well, it was the same cost as rent, and so now I'm just owning my home. It doesn't work like that.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting is that down payment that you get from your parents, it ends up being, isn't that really the first bit of equity that you have in the home? Because that pays off a part of the home prior to getting the loan.
It does. It is an important element to this too, because it's then equity that's in the home that you don't necessarily tap. It doesn't necessarily grow. If you have $10,000 of equity and your home increases by $10,000 because of market appreciation, it didn't matter that you had the first $10,000 in there. It was going to grow no matter what, right? So it's your equity increase is not derivative of how much equity you have to start. And then the other factor in this, if you mess up and you buy a home too soon, it stresses you out. So then you got to sell and go somewhere else. Then you're talking about real estate fees eating up that entire down payment assistance so you can pay the realtor to get out. And that is something that people don't think about.
There's a strategy that I vaguely remember, probably from 30 years ago. It's what I understood, when people were talking to me as a young man about, beginning to get on the cycle of buying homes. And that is, you would buy a home, you'd stay in it for 3 to 5 years. And then as financially things got better for you, you'd buy another home. And then you would get the whatever equity you'd put in that home. And then you'd buy another home in 3 to 5 years, and then buy another home in 3 to 5 years. But it never made sense to me, which isn't surprising, because certainly the first 3 to 5 years of paying off the mortgage, you're not really paying for any equity. You're just paying the interest.
No, it's exactly right. You're right for like one reason you knew you were right about, and maybe another one you didn't know why you were right. The first one is you're just paying interest. You were quite literally renting the first few years on a 30-year mortgage. If you had a 10-year mortgage or 15-year mortgage and you moved after 3 years, you'd probably be all right. 30-year mortgage or an interest-only mortgage or a 40-year-old mortgage, no, you're in trouble. And by the way, again, because it's unlikely that the equity of your home grew during that period of time much, the fees to sell the home again are going to each up. So you're gonna move backwards. That I'll tell you, we bought our first house in 2000, right after college, right? 2 years later, we moved again. Okay, and we got out scot-free, 0-0. No one lost. Right, we were fine. Okay. Then we moved again in 2007. Okay, so we were 5 years in the next house, made out okay because I chose to rent that property for several years after, just kept it. Now we've been on our one for 17 years, 18 years now coming up. And I'm like, my wife and I talk about this, I'm like, we're never going anywhere. I mean, I don't want to go anywhere, ever. And the thought of it is just like makes my skin crawl.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of those people that the best part of my housing situation, other than my 2.5% mortgage, is the fact that it will be paid off in a relatively short period of time. And then that is a few $1,000s a month that I can do whatever I want with. And I'm so looking forward to that, Mason. I've told you on this show before, and my coworkers mock me about it every month. I pay my mortgage in person, because I love the idea that I'm actually going to be out of debt in a finite period of time. And I tell people that, and they think I'm nuts, and I probably am. And I know it's a waste of time and money, but I get great joy out of handing a check to my bank every month.
How much more time do you have left?
On Earth? I don't know. Based on
no.
Oh.
How much time do you have?
5 years.
5 years. Okay, we have 5 years too.
Yeah, I mean, we should have a party.
We really should. And did you end up with a 15 as well?
I think we ended up with a 10.
Okay.
I'll say this, and we're kind of in this territory here in the conversation. You remember when you got your house and you went to the closing and it was kind of weird. You signed everything. You walk in the house for the first time. It feels special. You're like, and you order pizzas that night because, you're moving and you don't know what box you pack the towels in. Like everyone has the same experience and it's fun and exciting. What no one ever thinks about in that moment is the real great day, which is when you own the dang thing, right? And so like I, as an old fella, me and you, I'm really looking forward to that moment of just, oh my gosh, this is actually the excitement. And again, is it nerd excitement? Sure, but I live in the land of nerd excitement, so it's optimal nerd excitement.
So should our advice to younger people be, like, if you really are looking at buying a home as an investment, you need to be ready to stay there. I mean, you need to be in there for the long term.
Unless you're like some wild, HGTV flipper. Like, I don't know anything about that. That's not my thing. And some people are good at that. I've got friends that, man, they flipped houses all the time and made a ton of money. And I was just like, great for you. Couldn't do that myself. I don't have those skills or time. But I think if you're just a normal pedestrian person in this community, I think you buy and hold, and you don't try to time the market. I'll also say to that, what a lot of people end up doing is then they'll get the empty nester home, or they'll get the dream home. Then the whole plan goes out the window, because now you've created a mortgage payment in retirement, which, in my opinion, takes away half the utility of owning your home.
So it was the difference between your monthly mortgage payment for the 30-year versus the 15-year a lot? Or in the end, does it end up being not a lot?
The difference in the monthly payment between a 30 and a 15?
Right. Because a lot of people look at the 15 and go, oh, I'm not going to be able to handle that monthly payment. But you are going to save a lot of money and interest over the long haul.
Okay, so let's do math on the podcast. Like, here's how I think about this. Most people go into how much home they can afford, right? They say, okay, I can afford, again, we're picking numbers, no one cares, a $400,000 home. And I know this because I've reversed out what I want my payment to be on a 30-year mortgage. And then that sets my budget, and based on interest rates, this is how much home I can afford. And then, understandably, your realtor finds one that's just above that range. It's magical. I don't know how it happens. Happens every time. But I would suggest, Mason, where a person goes wrong in that scenario is when they do the reverse math, and this is a 30-year payment, just make it a 15-year payment. Just say, okay, I want to spend $1,800 a month, and instead of it buying me a $400,000 house, it buys me a $376,000 house, whatever the math is, and that's the target. That's what makes sense to me. And I would also say the math also supports that if you're having a 30-year mortgage at a higher rate over a longer period of time, you're going to pay, in most cases, at least $100,000 more in interest over the course of the loan. So what is not affording something? Is it a couple $100 a month more, or is it paying $100,000 over 30 years? I would argue that it's, I'd rather pay a couple $100 more a month.
Got it. One of the stories that we ran recently about the central Indiana home market suggested that buyers are on the sidelines waiting for interest rates to get better. So I've been tracking interest rates for, I'm almost 15 years now for IBJ. Big swings are not common. Are you just splitting hairs, really, if you're waiting for like a 6.75 to come down to a 6.5? Or is that really something smart to do?
I think you're splitting hairs. Timing any market is brutal. It is. That there's a saying that I'm going to butcher. It's something like marry the home, date the rate. It just basically means buy the stupid house, and then if you need to refinance. Like, yes, there is a cost to refinance. And yes, if it goes down a quarter point, you probably shouldn't refinance. But waiting around seems a little nutty. That being said, based on when this podcast hits people's ears, we're a couple weeks away from interest rates probably going down a little bit. We're probably going to see the Fed lower quarter point in the middle of September. Maybe. I think so. I'll tell you, there's no one more wrong about all of this stuff in our country than me. Every time absolutely, I'm wrong. So whatever I say, the opposite will occur.
Let's say I'm someone who is renting right now because I can't afford the house. I can't, from what I'm looking for and the math that I've done in my head, I can't afford the house. Should I be saving for a down payment on a home, or can that money be saved in an equally beneficial way for something else if I just really love renting?
That's super interesting. And it's, I built a calculator once in an Excel spreadsheet that sort of, I have to find it, that does that. It says, okay, well, I'm putting money away, it's grown at 9%, it's compounding over 30 years versus rent increases at 3.5% and blah, 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 blah. And it says, like, what do you do there? I do think if you're a renter and you're trying to think about how housing fits into your financial plan, then you really gotta lean into that exercise, and you have to let it play out. You have to say, okay, I'm going to be paying rent increasing at 3% or whatever for the rest of my life. What are the economics of that? How many assets or how much in assets do I have to offset the obligation on a monthly basis? And I also think, Mason, here's what I love. Let's say you're 50 years old. Boy, that was a good sound. Let's say you're 50 years old, okay? And you can become a homeowner right now. Of the last few years, you saved, it fits in your budget, get a 15-year mortgage. You're then 65, own your home outright, and it was the greatest comeback story of all time. And I think that's fascinating. So let's say you're 40 and you're listening to this right now and you're like, I'm renting, can't get my stuff together, whatever. Great, calm down. Take 10 years to get your stuff together, to figure out the budget, to save for the down payment, buy a house, 15-year mortgage. When you're 50 years old, you're done by the time you retire. Your entire financial life is saved. That's the thing about home ownership, is it can actually solve the biggest problem you have, which is the cost of housing, if you use it as part of a plan and not just to get killer Instagram pictures to make your friends sad and jealous.
That's great. Hey, we just came all the way around on that one. That's how it's supposed to work.
Look at us.
Hey, is this a good time to talk about your book?
I'm sure. I mean, it's right here on my desk.
Oh,
You're
really?
Talking about It's Not Your Fault, But It Is Your Problem by Peter Dunn. Mm-hmm. Boy, that was felt set up, but it wasn't.
No.
One of the chapters in the book is about home ownership, right? It's the idea that housing is such a difficult expense for so many workers that it becomes burdensome for their employers. The concept of the book is how people leaders can build amazing organizations by understanding their employees' financial challenges. Let's do some fun math. There are 8 financial crises that a person can encounter, okay? There's more than 8, but they fit into 8 buckets. That's to say, if you have any combination of those 8 things as one individual, there's 256 different possibilities of combinations of the 8 problems you can have. Fun exponential math there. If you're an HR person and you employ 10 people, then that is to say that you have to multiply all of those possible problems by 10, because that's what you have to deal with and come up with a benefits package or a transition plan or a turnover plan for all your people in your organization. So the premise is, being an HR person is harder than it's ever been before by the financial cultural dynamics of our culture.
Right. Yeah. And you went into this in greater depth in a column that you wrote within the last month. If folks want to look for it at IBJ.com.
Yeah. Here, I've written a lot of personal finance books, 10 or 11 or something. I actually don't know. Somewhere between 10 and 11, probably not 10 and a half. And this book is different because it is actually not about, it's about the downstream effect of personal finance issues as opposed to how to fix personal finance issues. And I really enjoyed writing it. And again, as a writer who's been writing for a very long time now, it is nice to look back like, man, my writing has not gotten worse. It's a little bit more interesting than it used to be. So that feels nice.
But it's more from an organizational standpoint. Say, for example, the company that employs you, not you personally, but people who have financial problems that can affect their performance at work.
I think if you're in senior leadership at any organization or in HR, what people bring to the office every day, their financial burdens become your problem, whether you like it or not. It's not your fault, but it is your problem.
I would suggest that these people in HR, they just hang around like the office bullpen for the first 15 minutes of every workday, and they will hear everybody talk about the problems that they're having at home.
Yeah. There's an example, it's not infrequent that a person starts talking about the cost of daycare at the office. It's a thing. And you hear it, and it's a shocking amount of money. I mean, it is shocking. I'm like, when I was a kid, I think my parents just put me in a drawer and went to work, and that was it. That's not true, by the way. It's a shocking amount of money. And you can, as an employer, you can look at that and be like, well, that's pretty bad, but hey, and no, it is actually your problem. Because inevitably what a person will do is they'll try to solve the problem by going to get a higher paying job. And by ignoring it, you're not helping yourself. Now, Are you going to give them a raise to account for the cost of increase? Not necessarily, but at least you can, arm them with resources and an honest discussion.
And is it not available right now? Can I get it?
Oh, yeah, yes. It's out available wherever bad books are sold. No, I mean, I can get it Amazon or whatever. Yeah. I don't like hawking books, but I appreciate you talking about it. But maybe you can get it at PeteThePlanner.com or Amazon.com, and it's not your fault, but it is your problem.
Say that
This is not a money-making venture for me. All proceeds of the book go to United Way of Central Indiana. So don't think this is a money grab.
All right. Hey, that's great. Well, I'll check it out. Well, I know you're busy. I will let you go. But thank you again for talking me off the ledge.
Thank you. I'm excited for our mortgages are paid off party. I'll send you a calendar invite.
Okay. Yeah, keep your 2029 free. My thanks again to Pete Dunn. And a quick reminder, his column on personal finance appears regularly in the print edition of IBJ, and you can find several years' worth of his work at IBJ.com. And folks, before you get on with the rest of your week, there are several features in this week's edition of IBJ I want to draw to your attention. First up, Columbus-based Sciho Insurance Services is a small health insurer tackling the huge challenge of growth in the employer-based benefits market in Indianapolis and across the state. Daniel Lee reports that it's taking on national insurers and scoring some early wins. Also in this week's issue, Taylor Wooten has an update on the progress made by the Indy Health District in improving outcomes in 5 historic Indianapolis neighborhoods. And Dave Lindquist sits down with local musician Otis Gibbs, who's enjoying a career renaissance through his music history storytelling channel on YouTube. And again, you can find these stories in the latest print edition of IBJ or online at IBJ.com. Now, I will tell you, it is quite a bit easier to access all the latest business news and all of IBJ's data on Central Indiana's business community and economy if you're a subscriber. And we're running a promotion right now that gives you complete access for $1 per week for 3 months, just to get a sense of how valuable and original our content is. Just go to IBJ.com, click on the subscribe button. And thank you again for making time this week for the IBJ Podcast. I'm Mason King. Hang in there, everybody. We'll be back again next week.
Indiana's biggest names, their most personal stories. The Business and Beyond podcast brings you one-on-one conversations with the state's top leaders in business, sports, politics, and culture. If you want to know what makes Indiana tick, this is your show. Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcasts or at IBJpodcasts.com.
Do you want to know what really drives change in Indiana? You won't find it in sound bites. You'll find it in stories. Stories from CEOs, lawyers, coaches, entrepreneurs, and community advocates. That's the IBJ Media Podcast Network. Insightful, local, impactful. Find all of our shows by searching IBJ Media in your podcast app or visit IBJpodcast.com.